Harare, the city that never sleeps, the sunshine city, perched at the crest of Kopi, dawn just breaking, looking down at this amazing place, a place I call home. I wondered how we had come to this place.
Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Make me in.
I left Zimbabwe at 17 in 1999 for what was supposed to be a 2-week visit abroad, and that 2 weeks turned into 10 years. Upon my return home, many things had changed, and granted, it had been 10 years after all. Our beloved Zimbabwe had just gone through a trying time economically, and many people, in an effort to seek opportunities, migrated. From the rural areas to townships, small towns, all the way to Harare, the young generation seems most affected by the economic downturn. Despite your political affiliation, it is no secret the effect that the sanctions placed on Zimbabwe have had on the population, and more so on the youth. With high unemployment in Zimbabwe, and considering that 67.5% of the population are youth, is it then shocking to anyone the desperate situations that many youth find themselves in? Each year, thousands of graduates are offloaded into an already saturated unemployment basin. Despite the slow growth in our economy and the economic difficulties, Zimbabwe has achieved and maintained excellent progress in education dating back to our independence. We are a nation of scholars. Our president, an academic in his own right, has always harped on the importance of a literate and educated nation. From having one university, the University of Zimbabwe, and a couple of tertiary institutions, to present day 2011, where we have many such institutions around the country, it's apparent one thing we as Zimbabweans don't lack is the grasp of the old age adage that education is key. So imagine the country's shock when in the Herald paper of April 24, 2011, as part of their feature, it emerged male and female students at the University of Zimbabwe were swapping sexual favors for food and accommodation with domestic workers and gardeners in Mount Pleasant. A study done by the university's own Center for Population Studies revealed this shocking information. The study also revealed that most of these students also had multiple concurrent partners, and females in particular were more vulnerable to contracting sexually transmitted diseases because they looked for more partners to provide financial and material support.
In fact, I think we need to have a bigger study to look at the welfare of young people across the country. How are young people coping? We know that most young people are not in formal employment. How are they living? How are they getting bread on their table? That is essential because it will make us know where the social ills are, where the opportunities are, and how we can assist them. So there's actually need for a bigger study, and we'll soon be talking to some of our partners to ensure that we're able to come up with a nationwide survey of the living standards of young people in Zimbabwe and be able to have factual information on it. Having said that, I think the situation at the University of Zimbabwe needs to improve. We're just surprised why the University of Zimbabwe simply cannot open the halls of residence for all these years. It is the kind of situation that creates social upheaval. You know, students are coming now having to squat with the housemaids in the yards there near the UZ. We don't feel that the UZ has got a reasonable excuse to be keeping those halls of residence locked. If anything, they should charge them and get some money to maintain them, which they can use really to improve the welfare of their students. So we are not happy with that situation, and we hope that the UZ will address it at the earliest possible time.
A few days later, another article came out, sounding a desperate alarm from sex workers. Whilst the sex worker trade is illegal in our country, They asserted that they were being charged sport fines of up to $10 by the police for prostitution, or alternatively, provide a free round of sex to avoid jail time. It's not a secret that sex work is rampant on the streets of Harare, exacerbated more so by the economic times. So, what are the facts? In Zimbabwe, women and girls comprise 62% of people living with HIV. The sexual debut for girls is earlier than that of boys, and they are likely to get infected by older men. Young women 15 to 24 years are 2 times more likely to be infected with HIV, unlike young men of the same age, and the reason is because of intergenerational sex. According to various published studies, young women's vulnerability to HIV is also due to the unequal power dynamics between girls and older sexual partners. It's also a fact that the small house phenomenon has spread like a wild bushfire. Transactional sex is the order of the day, especially in our universities, and sex work is thriving. So right now I'm at the University of Zimbabwe in Mount Pleasant, Harare. I found out about a brilliant book that's just been released, Genitals Are Assets, and I came to speak to Dr. Paranganda, who is the author of that book. So I'm going to have a short meeting with him and discuss the topic of commercial sex workers in detail.
From my research in the book, Genitals Are Assets, you find that most of the time, even men from mainstream society, according to the girls of the street, they don't use condoms. They don't.
On the street?
Yeah, they don't. Let alone the boys of the street who don't believe in the use of condoms at all.
Why don't they believe in it?
They think it's like having a sweet in a plastic. If you read the book, you'll get their attitude generally that it's like bathing whilst putting on what is it called? Raincoat. Yeah. So use of condoms on the streets, from my study, is quite minimal.
We set out as Youth Talk to explore the dynamics of both. Yes, our economy wasn't performing, but what would lead a young woman into sex work, even the young men, and for the university and college students, transactional sex? Was there a difference? Is there a difference between sex work and transactional sex? First, we had to define what sex work is. Is there a difference between sex work and transactional sex?
Any sexual activity that involves parties who are not married, right? And there is exchange of goods or financial services. Yeah, that could be a general definition. Because I'm thinking here of some ladies who might not be going into the streets or into the pubs. Yeah, but they have sexual relations with men who are married. Yeah, and they get services like payments for rentals, educational, finances for their children, or even themselves to do diplomas and so on in town by other men who are married legally. Or their rentals are paid, their clothing is paid for, and their accounts are paid for by different men, right? And so that is also commercial sex work.
So, okay, so what you're saying is, as long as there's some type of material gain,
yes,
doesn't
good.
necessarily have to be a direct exchange of money. Okay, I slept with you.
Good.
Here's money.
Yeah.
So as long as there's some type of gain.
Yes, good, excellent. That becomes commercial sex work.
Then I guess you say most women are commercial sex workers.
Yes.
In my generation.
Yeah, This is exactly what I'm saying. As long as you have gained illegally, because those are illicit relations with married people. Yeah, and so it's commercial sex work.
The traditional commercial sex worker that is generally understood by society is a sex worker anomira ma streets yamunana kamira ma streets ovura bachira kasina kupfeka to attract my clients. Is that the definition of commercial sex work that we can talk about today? When we look at the downturn in the economy of our country, we see that a lot of changes took place in terms of managing families, in terms of managing homes, in terms of surviving. You all know what happened in 2008. As a result, a lot of people, commercial sex workers, they started engaging in sexual activities for survival. Is that the definition of a commercial sex worker? Pani vakadzi, from what we gather, vari married, vari kuenda out there to have sex for money. Do we call them commercial sex workers? Pani vana vechikoro, who need to survive, they need to pay their fees, they need to eat, they need bus fare, who go out there and engage in commercial sex work. Do we call them commercial sex workers? So I think there's a need to redefine the concept of commercial sex work.
I think this is an industry which has been there for decades, if not centuries. And commercial sex work does not exist in Zimbabwe alone. It also exists even in the developed world. But in the developed world, maybe they've commercialized, commercial sex work, they've legalized it, and they are able to regulate it. But in this country, commercial sex work is illegal, and at the end of the day, it comes underground, it becomes underground. That's why I think when you were interacting with some of these commercial sex workers, they can't really come out and say, I'm a commercial sex worker, because it's illegal. So we are still at that stage where we're saying, what do we do with commercial sex work? It exists, and I know, there are some of my friends their mothers were commercial sex workers, and they were able to go to school through those resources from commercial sex work. So if you're a commercial sex